Hello, you are watching Shalom World News. I'm Rudy McLennan coming to you from Glasgow, Scotland. Here are the latest headlines from around the world. Australian Cardinal George Pell passed away in Rome at the age of 81 following complications from hip surgery on Tuesday night. He died at the Salvator Mundi Hospital in the Italian capital at 9 p.m. local time. Cardinal Pell was a key figure in the Australian and global church. He was Australia's most well-known prelate and served as Archbishop of the Sydney and Melbourne Archdiocese. He also served as the Prefect of the Secretariat for the Economy from 2014 to 2019. In 2018, he was convicted of abusing two teenage choir boys in the sacristy of St Patrick's Cathedral while he served as Melbourne's Archbishop in 1996. But Cardinal Pell always maintained his innocence, and the High Court unanimously overturned his convictions in 2020. The news of his death has shocked the Catholic Church in Australia, with former Prime Minister Tony Abbott lamenting that Australia had lost a great son and the Church has lost a great leader. May he rest in peace. In his message for the 31st World Day of the Sick, Pope Francis urged believers to consider the fact that it is primarily through the experience of vulnerability and illness that we can learn to walk together according to the style of God. The World Day of the Sick is observed annually by the Catholic Church on February the 11th on the Solemnity of Our Lady of Lourdes. The parable of the Good Samaritan from the Gospel of Luke serves as the inspiration for this year's observance. In his message, the Holy Father emphasises kindness and care for the sick as a synodal exercise of healing to which God calls us. He emphasised that while illness is a part of the human condition, it can become inhumane when experienced in solitude and abandonment, unaccompanied by care and compassion. US Catholic bishops have issued a challenge to the Biden administration after the US Food and Drug Administration declared for the first time that pharmacists can sell abortion medicines. Bishop Michael Burbridge of Arlington in Virginia, the head of the Bishops' Committee on Pro-Life Activities, stated on Friday that the FDA should safeguard the lives and health of both mothers and children rather than relax safety regulations in response to pressure from businesses or government. They urged the administration to change its policy priorities and support women in need. Burbridge's statement was in response to the FDA's recent decision to permit any patient with a prescription to buy the abortion medication mifepristone from a neighbourhood retail drugstore. Meanwhile, pro-life group Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising will hold nationwide protests at pharmacy store chains CVS and Walgreens locations in key cities across the nation. They have tweeted their demand to keep abortion out of pharmacies. Marking the 150th birth anniversary of Saint Therese of Lisieux, the Church has declared a Jubilee year. It was on January the 8th that the holy doors of the Basilica of Lisieux in northern France were opened by Bishop Jacques Habert of Bayeux and Lisieux, marking the beginning of the Jubilee year that will conclude on Sunday, January the 7th in 2024. After the opening of the holy doors, the bishop offered Holy Mass for pilgrims and announced the indulgences attached to the Holy Year. In Alençon, where the saint was born, the doors of the cathedral were also opened on the same day, marking the beginning of the Jubilee. The motto of the Jubilee year is "For Trust and Love," which are the final words of the Carmelite saint's autobiography, The Story of a Soul. Born on January the 2nd in 1873, Saint Therese joined the Discalced Carmelites in 1888 and passed away on September the 30th in 1897 at the age of 24. Pope Pius XI canonised her in 1925, and Pope St John Paul II declared her to be a Doctor of the Church on October the 19th in 1997. After the Brazilian Congress, Supreme Court and Presidential Palace were stormed on Sunday by supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro, thousands held pro-democracy rallies across the nation. Sao Paulo, Brazil's largest city, hosted the largest rally, where proponents of democracy demanded justice and refused to provide amnesty to those who broke the law. On Sunday, more than 1,500 protesters were detained for rioting. Most of them have been sent to prison, and investigators say they will charge around 1,000 of them. According to President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, extremists will be punished by the law. Camps that were set up outside of army barracks by protesters who adamantly refused to recognise the outcome of the presidential election have now been taken down. Before the riots, Bolsonaro, who lost the closely contested presidential election, went to a Florida hospital for treatment for abdominal pain. In his prayer intention for January, Pope Francis has called on educators to incorporate fraternity into their lesson plans. The Pontiff stressed that educators are a witness who impart not only their knowledge, but also their beliefs and their commitments to life. Education itself, he continued, is an act of love that can point us in the direction of recovering a sense of brotherhood. He urged prayers so that educators may be credible witnesses, teaching fraternity rather than confrontation, and assisting notably the youngest and most vulnerable above all. The Pope's worldwide prayer network states that the Holy Father wants to widen the reach of education so it will not be focused solely on content. According to church officials, over 1.6 million Catholics attended the Black Nazarene feast in Manila, the capital of the Philippines, after a 3-year gap. Despite the cancellation of the Traslación, which is the solemn procession that millions of devotees normally participate in while walking barefoot, large numbers attended the ceremonies from January the 6th to the 10th. After a break caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, the feast was resumed with various restrictions in place, such as a ban on the Great Procession with the statue of the Black Nazarene. According to Father Earl Valdez, the parish priest of Quiapo Church, which houses the shrine, this year's attendance was significantly lower than in years past, when Catholics from all over the nation travelled to Manila to fulfil their commitment to the Black Nazarene. The statue, which was brought by the Spaniards centuries ago, is believed to be miraculous by the faithful. Bishop Rolando Alvarez of Nicaragua, who has been under house arrest in the capital Managua, will stand trial on charges of conspiracy and disseminating false news. He has been kept under house imprisonment in Nicaragua since August in 2022 under the dictatorship of President Daniel Ortega and his wife, Vice President Rosario Murillo. Bishop Alvarez, one of the most outspoken critics of Daniel Ortega's authoritarian dictatorship, was taken into custody by the Nicaraguan police during the early hours of August the 19th in the chancery of the Diocese of Matagalpa. The bishop was brought to Managua and placed under house arrest. In her report, investigator Martha Patricia Molina disclosed that the Ortega regime had perpetrated nearly 400 crimes against the Catholic Church in the country. Several Catholic priests and lay people have been detained in the notorious El Chipote torture facility. Additionally, Ortega has banished nuns of the Missionaries of Charity, started by St. Mother Therese of Calcutta, as well as banned the Apostolic Nuncio, Archbishop Waldemar Stanisław Zomatag, from the nation. Giorgia Meloni, Italy's first female Prime Minister, and Pope Francis met on Tuesday at the Vatican. The 45-year-old politician visited the Vatican for the third time in 9 days during the brief 30-minute private meeting. Along with President Sergio Mattarella, Meloni was among the first to pay tribute to the late Pope Benedict XVI on January the 2nd. On January the 5th, she also went to St. Peter's Square to attend the Pope Emeritus's funeral. Meloni introduced Pope Francis to her team. This was Meloni's first papal audience since taking office as Prime Minister on October the 22nd, and she was joined by her 6-year-old daughter, Ginevra. According to the Vatican, key socio-economic challenges facing the nation, such as the family, demographics, poverty and education, were discussed. Global issues such as immigration and the war in Ukraine were also discussed. The legal team of jailed Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai has requested UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak for an immediate meeting. Mr Lai, who is a British citizen, may spend the rest of his life in prison if found guilty of sedition and cooperating with foreign forces under Hong Kong's draconian national security law. The international legal team for Mr Lai stated in a letter obtained by the BBC that they wanted to talk about possible avenues to secure Lai's release. His defence attorneys call the evidence against him very troubling. With multiple counts against him, Jimmy Lai has already spent 2 years in jail. He received an additional 5 years and 9 months in prison in December for violating the terms of the lease for the newspaper's headquarters. His defenders assert that all of the accusations against him are politically motivated. Lai's now defunct pro-democracy journal Apple Daily had been running for more than 25 years. Nigerian politicians have been warned by Cardinal John Onaiyekan to desist from attempting to rig the outcome of the general elections that will take place next month. In a report on Sunday, the Cardinal said the polls set for February the 25th would not be business as usual because Nigerians have high expectations. During Holy Mass commemorating his 40 years as a bishop, Cardinal Onayakan was cited as saying, "All those who are going to play games and scheme to rig to frustrate the desire of the people's decision about the results of the elections should stop from such." The Cardinal continued to express concern that any electoral fraud could endanger the stability of the most populous country in Africa. Pope Francis has expressed his condolences over the 40 people who died and others who were hurt in a devastating bus accident in central Senegal. In a telegram sent to the President of Senegal, Macky Sall, via Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Pope Francis extended his sympathies over the victims of the incident in which two buses collided. The Pope prayed for God to receive the departed into his serenity and pleaded with him to console everyone impacted by the tragedy. The accident took place at 3:30 a.m. on January the 8th in the Kafrine region's Genevi village. Following the tragedy, the President announced 3 days of national mourning and announced he would convene an interministerial commission to consider road safety measures. According to Public Prosecutor Cheikh Dieng, a deflated tyre caused a bus to drift over the road, hitting another. This week in Bangladesh, thousands of members of religious and racial minorities marched from Chittagong, the nation's second largest city, to the capital city Dhaka, seeking laws to safeguard them from prejudice and repression. Following the march, the organisers presented a petition with a list of requests to the office of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on January the 7th. They requested the government to meet these demands before the upcoming general election, which is slated for January next year. The petition listed several promises made by the incumbent Awami League government to minorities before the most recent national election in 2018. They alleged the promises have not been kept. According to Father Anthony Sen, convener of the Justice and Peace Commission of the Dinapur Catholic Diocese, the government is reluctant to provide security to minorities because of concerns that doing so could annoy the Muslim majority and cost them votes in the election. And those are your latest headlines. Do join us again tomorrow for more, and do remember you can always visit swnews.org for more updates. Shalom.